tell us, Disco, about something that did temporarily make an appearance on the Eagle then in the form of Eagle Eye. We talked a little bit about detecting targets, sort of radar performance, no lock intercepts, all that kind of stuff. Where did Eagle Eye, which I think that was was that late 80s, early 90s?
It was, well, no, I would say it was late 70s, early 80s.
Oh, okay.
Once we had any EID capability, the ability to discern our targets, good guys or bad guys, then we auctioned them off as rifle scopes to our local hunters. So made a little money for the squadron fund, you know that. Here's some beer money. What happened to all these Eagle Eyes? They were going to go to government surplus anyway. So, yeah, because its longevity in the inventory of the United States Air Force was dated on our ability to determine what we were looking at on the radar by electronic means. Yeah. Good guy, bad guy, friendly or bandit. To go back to Vietnam, the biggest problem with the Air Force's use of the F-4 and the AIM-7E was the inability to determine friend or foe in the skies over North Vietnam. By the time the F-4s got into range against very small targets, we're talking MiG-21. That thing is just a little needle of an airplane pointed at you. In the MiG-17, not much bigger. 19 slightly bigger, but those weren't that prevalent anyway. But so by the time you arrived nose to nose, beak to beak, in visual range of a MiG-21 and could tell it was a MiG-21. And of course, in all honesty, what you really had to do was be able to tell it wasn't an F-105, or it wasn't a Navy F-8 Crusader, or it wasn't a Navy F-4. You could always tell if it was an F-4 at long range because it smoked so much if it was in military power, right? So, but anyway, so if you could see the airplane, see the target, and it wasn't one of ours, then you could declare bandit, box one, and get a missile in the air. But unfortunately, those ranges were so close to minimum range for the missile. We called it break X because there was an X that would show up on the radar scope denying you the opportunity to fire. Is that now you were locked into a visual dogfight with a highly maneuverable airplane, and you're flying this freight van of a truck, this big lorry of an airplane, trying to get around and use your energy superiority to get around to his 6 o'clock and maybe prevent him from running away. But if they went downhill, and even if an F-4 got behind him with a pulse-only radar, it was overwhelmed with ground clutter, and so you couldn't get an AIM-7 to do a tail chase to a kill anyway. So it was very, very problematic. The technology set up for our guys flying F-4s, and they did the best they could with what they had, but they were limited by the ROE requiring visual identification and not having the means to do so at a range to employ the weapons, if that makes sense. Yeah. The Eagle Eye, well, the F-15 had the same problem when it was being developed, because again, our adversaries were small. In training, they were the F-5s, not much bigger than a MiG-21 in terms of this visual cross-section. So to be able to identify the target as an adversary or not as a friendly, you had to have some sort of enhanced capability. That's what brought about TIZIO for the F-4, the TV system. That was all about slaving a TV camera to the radar line of sight and producing an image on the Wizzo's screen in the back seat, and the Wizzo could announce that it's a MiG-21. Shoot, to the nose gunner. So that was the F-15's solution to the problem was, well, let's put a rifle scope, a 9-power rifle scope used for hunting, mount it to the HUD, align it with the airplane central reference point on the HUD, in other words, where the nose is pointing. And then once you got a radar lock, the target, of course, is in the target designator box, a little square container, and you put that over the airplane reference point, and then you would lean forward, put your eye to the scope, hope nobody moved, and see what was there. Well, guess what? You got two moving parts to this problem. One is the bad guy. If he's not going to fly straight at your eyeball, right? No, he's going to be going one way or the other, right? And plus, your airplane. So and it's just human nature. It's just muscle memory and all that. If a person is holding a stick and flying an airplane, and they lean forward, they tend to pull the stick back, and so you wind up raising the nose of the eagle, and there's nobody home. You look through the eagle, and there's nobody there. And then if you want to fly around, like you're making buttermilk in an old churn. If you want to fly around with your eyeball on the back end of a rifle scope while the target is getting closer and closer and closer and closer, all these seconds, then you probably ought to get another line of business. Because that's not a good way of entering a fight, is with your eyeballs pressed to a rifle scope and the bad guy swarming in behind you. So it was, that was a good idea, and it was very effective against bombers. Against, for instance, when we launched off of alert at Bitburg to investigate. That was one of the categories of intercepts. Investigate this target. Well, you could do that. In other words, if you were investigating a light airplane, a Cessna or something, or let's say a Swiss biz jet happened into the NATO air defense identification zone without a clearance. He's flying straight and level. For those kind of targets, sure, you put the eagle eye on them and go, yeah, that was a Cessna 172, blah blah blah, or that's a Pilatus, whatever. But so those are routine, very low demand situations. Fighter versus fighter. The only advantage was if you were at red flag or fighting the aggressors in any way, and you went out there, and as soon as spikes on, you saw them marching down the scope, you took your radar lock, and you kind of lean forward into the scope and go, well, I tried. Bandit, Fox 1. and when the aggressor flight leader, flight commander, questioned, did you have a proper VID? Oh yeah, I had my eagle eye. So it was good for getting an early kill, eliminating one of the F5s out of the fight, and going 2v3 against the remainder. That was its only use. It was like throwing it down on the poker table at Vegas and say, I raise you one rifle scope.